There it is. All right, we're here with Rene and Crystal for the Creativity Talks. And tonight we have Chandler Patton, who is an award-winning playwright, a screenwriter, a voice teacher, and a graduate of Carnegie Mellon. And we're going to talk to Chandler about her creative process and her long list of accomplishments in the world of creativity.
Sure. Yay.
So Chandler, I'd love to just start by having you introduce yourself. I mean, I know I just read the kind of CV version.
That was pretty good. That was pretty good. I'm definitely a slashy. I do a lot of different things. I studied dramaturgy, which is a weird word, for basically like the mechanics of making drama, understanding structure and form, and sort of providing a link between the director, the cast, the audience, and the playwright, or the time period if it's an older work, like a lot of historical research. Really, I just wanted a strong foundation in historical research. I'm also a performer, so I thought about going to school for musical theater. But then I just realized, like, I don't really want to spend a third of my time dancing when I could be studying English and history and philosophy and gender studies and all of that stuff. So I ultimately went with the very specific major of dramaturgy.
Just to pause you right there, is that like drama liturgy? Is that kind of what that means?
Great question. So it's more related to like the word metallurgy.
Okay.
So like metallurgy is like making ore. So it's essentially making drama. So
wow.
And we could have a whole other podcast about like the history of dramaturgy, but basically there's sort of two major schools of it. There's the German version and there's the French version. So I was trained in the German version, which is why it's like dramaturgy. It's like a weird dramaturg, and then I don't know very much about the whole French school of it, but and it's a very, very old form, in fact, but it's a relatively new thing to major in at school. There's only a few. I think there's maybe 2 or 3 undergrads in the whole country.
Wow.
Most people go for that for more of like a master's degree situation. So there's a lot of programs for that, but so very, very specific degree.
Dramaturgy has something in common with my bachelor's in creativity. There was nowhere to get a degree, a bachelor's in creativity. We had to self-design. So
yes,
thought I'd throw that out there.
Yeah, it was kind of my sneaky way of like, I went to a conservatory. Carnegie Mellon is a conservatory. They're very, very hardcore about their curriculum. And sort of for most people there, it's like, if you're an actor, you're doing the acting track, like that's it. Whereas I was just basically trying to turn it into a liberal arts degree. So that's how I got away with that. I was able to sort of craft, my own tracks in terms of the history and English and philosophy that I wanted to study.
Yeah.
So that was my sneaky way of turning that degree into what I wanted it to be. So I majored in that, and that gave me a really strong background in historical research, and all the structural writing things that we were talking about. So and then so I write plays, I have a TV series I'm developing, musicals.
Very cool.
Tell Crystal about the play I saw 3 years ago, 2 years ago, 3 years ago? How many years ago?
4 years. I don't know. Time doesn't exist, but probably 4 years ago at this point.
And the connection the connection with your family.
Yes. Okay. So I wrote a play that's called The Legend of Bonnie Ann. It's a pirate play. It's in verse. I don't know what I was thinking. That was an insane decision. It took about 10 years, added about 10 years to the project. But basically, so Anne Bonny was this super badass, amazing pirate from the golden age of piracy. And I grew up, so my whole family, my mom's side of the family is from Charleston, South Carolina. And I grew up going out there in the summers, and my great uncle Daryl, it's like he was like a movie character. He would like sit out, literally you couldn't write this scene, you wouldn't believe this scene if I wrote it. Like he would like sit out on the balcony like smoking his tobacco, and he would tell us, he was an expert in local genealogy. They're actually from Georgetown, in this like back swamps of Georgetown. And so there's all this Revolutionary War history, of course, Civil War history. Fascinating for me, being from LA, where, you know, they just kind of build over it. There is a lot of history here, but they build over it.
Yeah.
Going to Charleston for the first time was like, oh my gosh. And going to visit my great uncle, and he would sit there and he would just tell us these stories of our family history. And so I grew up hearing this story of Anne Bonny. It was this pirate woman who was like, grew up on a plantation in South Carolina, and then eventually ran away and joined this band of pirates and had this famous trial, and like escaped being hung because she was pregnant, and then disappears from the historical record. Nobody knows what happened. They know she had her baby, but nobody knows, like, did she escape? Did someone help her? How did this happen? Did she die?
Wow.
And so always heard this mysterious tale of Anne Bonny, and according to my great uncle, we are related to her. Now very much in this like movie sort of scene way. I was always like, once I started doing the research, I decided I wanted to write about her. I was like, can you send me your research? Like, can you prove that we're related to her? And he was like, of course, I'll send it to you. And then he never sent it to me, and then he passed away. So it's still kind of like it's kind of fitting. It's like, so I don't really know if I'm related to her or not. I feel I hope we are, but I don't want to go around falsely claiming that we absolutely are. He could have made it up, but it's kind of fitting for the legend.
Yeah.
But yeah, so her story is just so fascinating and so cool. And so I was taking a class on historiography, which I don't want to be like pretentious. I don't want to like talk down to people, but basically historiography is the study of how history is written, which was my favorite class. And so we were assigned to look into contested history, like something that they don't know, it could go either way. And when I was given that assignment, I was like, the story of Anne Bonny, I'm going to study that. And so I started doing really deep research on that. And at the same time, I was in a playwriting class, and I was like, perfect. I'll just do that. I'll make it work, inform the other. So yeah, I started, and it's a monster. The first draft was like 250 pages, which is just absolutely unacceptable. That is illegal. You're not allowed to write a play that long. And then I spent the next few years refining and paring it down, and finding the muscular story that I was always trying to tell within it. And so yeah, we did a very bootleg, like put it up ourselves, raised the money, did we're setting sail, and did a couple of different productions of that. And yeah, so that's that play, which is now being they're going to do it at West Ranch High School, I believe, next semester. So that's fun. We'll have a bunch of high school kids playing pirates.
How fun.
I'm so sorry. I'm going to blow my nose. This is disgusting.
That's okay. Go ahead.
You can mute.
Okay. Well, too late. Okay.
I saw the play, and Jim and I made it a habit in I don't know, maybe 2014. I can't quite remember. We went every week, if not twice a week. He would go twice a week, Wednesdays and Saturdays, to these original plays in like Hollywood. They started having these little pop-up theaters with like seats for 60 people, 20 people. And so people would be able to afford putting up their plays. And usually it was just a few people in it, maybe 4 or 5. And so I feel like I had been like a local theater person. And I've seen so many original plays. And so I was expecting that when I went to see Chandler's play, and it was epic. How many people were in it? 20?
22. And it was a small space. We probably shouldn't have put that many people in it, but got to do it.
And it was I didn't expect music. The music was haunting. I was so moved. It was unforgettable. It was just really, really good. And it's just so disappointing how hard it is as a singer or a writer, or a novelist. It's just so hard to get your work out there. You do all the work, creating it. And I was really happy I got to see it, and I know you would probably love to put it on again, but maybe they can film it if West Ranch gets a really good.
That would be nice. Yeah, and actually I'll give them a little shout out here. So we were doing that production as a part of a festival called the She LA Theater Festival. And there's one in New York. And it's basically a company that is supposed to they are trying to address the problem of like the gatekeeping of so many of these opportunities. You have to pay yourself to even submit. And then it's really just a racket. They're just, taking so many submissions. They're not going to actually produce anything. It costs so much money. You just have to do all these submissions. So this festival was designed to, if you get accepted into this festival, they pay for the theater, they pay for the house manager, the lighting designer, all of that. And you just have to get your show up, right. Which still costs a lot of money. I just got carried away. I was like, nope, we're doing swords. Like somebody needed to rein me in.
You have to have swords if you have pirates. It seems like an
had to do the swords. They were awesome. The swords were amazing. Again, terrifying. It was a very small space. So, and we were not holding back. We are doing swashbuckling. Like I'm like, it's basically a 3D, like just in your face. But yeah, so it still was very expensive to self-produce it, which that is a real shame. It's really prohibitive, to just get your work seen or put up. But yeah, so this company, She LA, they do a really cool festival. And so that was how we got to do that, which was very, very nice.
That's great. That's really cool.
Yeah. And it does have a score. I'm sorry.
What were you saying?
Oh, and she was saying the music. So it's a play in verse that has a score. It flirts with being a musical. There's like a couple of numbers that we kind of started to dip a toe. But really it's actually, so this is interesting if you're a nerd like me. So I think they call it diegetic, which basically means like you can have music that's diegetic or non-diegetic, meaning are the characters literally singing? Or is it like most musicals where you're hearing their internal thoughts, but they're not really singing? So like you take something like Cabaret. Cabaret is kind of weird because sometimes you're kind of hearing their thoughts, but in general, they're really singing.
Yeah,
It's an actual cabaret. In ours, 90% of the music, if it's sung, they're singing. It's like tavern song. It's just a bunch of drunk pirates singing tavern songs.
Right.
But then there is a sequence where we kind of just decided, which, normally I would be like, don't break your form. What are we doing? We haven't established this rules. Why have we earned this? But it's a very critical, emotional moment in the storytelling that we chose to do diegetically, where they're singing, but they're not really singing. So I don't know. That was an interesting choice. But the composer is a genius. He's unbelievable. And I don't use that word lightly. And so his name is Stephen Schmidt. And we've been writing together forever. We went to high school, junior high and high school together. And so yeah, it's a play in verse with a score.
Very fun. Very fun. I wanted to just talk about your research process because I love the idea. I love the idea of the way that you modeled your education and how much that must inform your creative pursuits. Like it's sort of, you set yourself up to have like just endless fodder for creative work, right?
Yeah.
Whereas I don't necessarily know how a lot of, creative programs like degrees and things are structured, but I imagine it's a lot of craft and not a lot of like background, right?
That to me, those two, they're kind of inextricable, I guess. Like what is the craft if not understanding the form that you're doing, right? So right. Like but you're absolutely right. What's interesting for me is I didn't really anticipate how much of what inspires me and motivates me to create, some of it is that making it up out of thin air sort of magical thing that we all pursue. But for me, I am just so floored by history. I'm so taken with it. I can't, there's stuff that's just so unbelievable that you couldn't write it. And so I've gotten to a place where I've just been so inspired by so many historical stories. I'm just a big nerd. I love reading old, weird books. I'm just up at 4 o'clock in the morning, like reading translation.
Like somebody else I know. Hello.
Exactly. We connected super hard. Renee was the first person.
No, I mean Crystal.
Oh,
I think all three of us probably qualify.
Okay, same. So we're a bunch of nerds, so we get it. Yeah, Renee and I connected really hard about William Blake one time, and I was like, I adore you. This is precious. Nobody in my life cares about William Blake. But so I kind of thought I was going to be doing a lot more of inventing of stories and, inspiration of like my own volition, but there's just too much in the historical record. So why not go there? People really lived.
Yeah. It seems like people are really eager to kind of reimagine history. And, in a way, I feel like it states a need that we have to answer a lot of questions about the past that we simply can't answer.
Yes.
Like whether you're actually related to a pirate or not, for instance,
Right.
And it's sort of a cathartic way to kind of reach back into the past and play with those ideas, and not to come up with some objective truth about it, but to interact with the energies or the characters or the historical figures. I mean, look at the success of Hamilton, for instance.
Absolutely.
It's not just because it was great music, it wasn't just that. It was this reimagining of something that we can't really put our finger on, we can't really feel and engage with until we see it performed, essentially.
You essentially just articulated the thesis of Anne Bond. I mean, and essentially there were times where we would laugh because we would be in historiography class and you inevitably come to the conclusion at some point that there's things we can't know. It's lost. We don't know, and we never will. And so sometimes we would be sitting around and be like, are we paying $50,000 to sit in a circle and go, truth isn't real, nothing is real? But it really hits deep. And
that's exactly what I did for my degree too, because I studied philosophy. So yeah. In the end,
so you get it. What are we paying? They're just paying to basically be like, it's all nothing or everything, or is it? But
a little of both.
And what's really interesting, I loved the way you were talking about like trying to, yes, on some level you're trying to strive for some kind of truth, if that exists, the closest thing you can get to it. But eventually, and that's where, for me, that's why it expresses itself in a theatrical form, which is sometimes you have to, in order to get to some kind of deeper emotional truth, maybe those details are not accurate. Maybe those details, and that's essentially what the other huge overarching thing that I learned in my degree, which was how to have lenses. How to have lenses of different history, of like the moment we're in now versus the moment of when was your source material written? When is this one written? And being able to look through all of that and go, in order to connect with the audience with what I'm trying to express now, I have to give it to them through their own lens. And that might be not accurate. And that's okay. And for a dramaturg, sometimes that's like, but what do you mean we're going to change that? We're going to combine all those people into one character, and like, no, that's not real. But that's not what you're after. And if it's going to have this impact, then that's what needs to drive those choices, as long as you do right by the history and your own.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, it begs the question too, I think about this often about like the standardized education around history. We're memorizing dates and who did this and, who won this war and whatever else. First of all, a lot of that knowledge is contested, if only from the sense that the conquerors get to write history, right? So we're already looking at it through that lens. It's really difficult to say that history is objective. I mean, I think it's quite irresponsible to say that it is. Yes. And yet we're still delivering it in such a dry way where, history is basically learning how to take tests so that you can figure out, like which date is what, like, get your grade that way, right? Like memorizing these facts. But actually, I think it's really interesting to think about what would connect us more to history and make it more real and more tangible and relevant to us. is it memorizing the facts, or is it engaging in an emotional way with what it might have been like, even if it's completely through a modern lens that's inaccurate, you know, but really imagining like, you know, what would it be like to be a part of this war? What would it be like to be this like rogue pirate with a baby, you know, like what an experience, what a human experience, you know? So
when I was teaching live, I don't teach live anymore because of COVID. But when I was teaching my humanities through the arts class live, of course, you know, you go to these teacher trainings when you're in the community college, you go to flex hours, and the big word is relevance, as you said. You have to make it relevant. And so for my course, in day one, I say you get to be emotional, bring your emotions to the table. And so when I was teaching live, I didn't know I was, you know, I don't remember history. So I'm the teacher and I'm like going back and we got to look at the art from, you know, the Dark Ages and the plague. And plague, what's the plague again? I don't remember. I go, I start researching, I bawl my eyes out. I can't believe how this never impacted me as a young person. I'm, you know, 45 years old teaching. So I bring all the kids in. There was probably 30 kids in the class, students, I shouldn't say kids. And what we do is I shut the lights off and I made them each write down 30 people in their circle that they know. And then and they didn't know why they had to do it. And then I said, write down your best friend, write down your mother, write, you know. And so they had all these things, and then one by one, everyone died, right? And then they had to talk about the emotions of losing everyone. And then I showed slides of the art from that era with dead bodies, and you know, it is disgusting. But I felt like this is the one thing that is so palpable. You know, the Black Plague. You know, we sang "Ring Around the Rosies" growing up, and I never knew any of this. You know,
Yeah.
so making it relevant is great. But there's also another thing that we do. It's one of the student learning outcomes, SLOs, is we cannot ever have absolute certainty of any work of art and how it's going to land in culture and what it's going to, what if the author or the artist or, you know, whatever, if what they intended is what is going to happen with that work. And so when you brought up Hamilton, that's what I thought of. He's doing history. He's making it as close to, you know, he's as close to the historical records. Then he's, you know, flipping it and making everybody African American and, you know, people of color. And then, because he worked on it 7 years before, we had this huge divisive thing going on in, you know, 7 years before. So he actually was a prophet. He, if you watched Hamilton when I did, which was, I never watched it until our country was going through all the fighting over, you know, Trump, and we were divided. And I thought, he's a prophet. Like, he had no idea he was writing about the past, but he was writing about the future.
That's true. And something you said earlier too, which is just the frame. It's so overwhelming when you're a kid and you're just trying to put the story together and you don't have any frame of reference for any of it. So they're making comparisons to other historical events and you don't even know what that means. And it's just like, it has to come down to like, I have to memorize these stupid words. I don't know, like, I just have to memorize it until you start to just have enough life experiences to go to a place where something happened and you can visualize the narrative. You're standing in the spot somebody died. You're standing. I mean, that will start to make it become more visceral. And similarly, like witnessing it as a narrative that's actually enjoyable. Like, I'm sure there's a whole generation of people who would know that Common Sense was written by Thomas Paine because of Hamilton. And like, there's a whole can of worms we can. I don't even think we should dip into the Hamilton historiography controversy of questions of that stuff, because that's just would take too long to get into. But there is sort of that overarching idea, which is like, it isn't completely historically accurate, and yet in a lot of deep, profound ways, it is. And it means something. It tells a story that we can connect to. And just reading a Wikipedia article isn't going to do that. And like you said, the speculating about, well, we don't know, but we could assume. Like, I spent a lot of time thinking about what it would be like to be a woman on a ship, surrounded by men, and just the practical reality of that, what that meant, what that looked like, how Yeah, just dealing with that. Yeah. And it led to a lot of really interesting questions of just, okay, well, we don't know what happened, but this is what could have happened. And if it could have happened, it probably has happened to somebody.
In a creativity sense, though, using your imagination on that deep level, I think is pretty powerful because it's engaging you with your own visualization, your own capacity, and your own imagination.
yes,
And it's connecting us. This is the lens that I see everything through from my training. When we revisit history, these works of art, these plays, these musicals, the poetry, the Hildegard stuff, it is connecting us. It's connecting us with the past and with the people before us. And as
yes,
if, what they have left behind, we just kind of pick up with it. And we
yes.
kind of ride on their coattails or their shoulders. And then the people after us will be, kind of doing the same thing with what we leave behind. And that's what creative works do, is they connect us with the past and with the people that have gone before us.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's kind of the basis of empathy, right? So we're not learning history to get an A, right? Like maybe we need to know what it's like to, be in a college prep class and whatever. That's a separate skill set. But the history itself is ultimately to both connect us to the past and to the future, like you're saying, Rene. And so, like you said, Chandler, when you're thinking about, well, I don't know if this happened, but it could have happened. This could have happened. It's plausible, right? Then that connects you to everyone in whatever that historical period is and what the possibilities of their existence were, possibilities that don't exist for us now, right?
Yes. And like all that storm that led to that exact historical moment. And then the shocking realization that so much of that is relatable. And just that was just a human being. Like, I just spend so much time thinking about what did this really look like? Because I think when we kind of visualize history, a lot of times we're informed by whatever means that they had of recording it. So like like in my mind, when I imagine the Victorian age, everything's kind of black and white and kind of like, and you're like, no, what would this have looked like in full color? Like, what would that have actually been like? Yes. And then even more removed as the farther back you go, where we don't even have, any evidence, physical evidence, and just how profound it feels. And I'm also super, super obsessed with Indigenous history and ancient world history. And my boyfriend is a landscape photographer. So we've had this amazing sort of journey together where I just happen to find myself in stunningly beautiful natural locations in the best light. And while he is busy, doing his photos, I just have lots and lots of time to just kind of commune with nature and stand in awe of places. And we've found ourselves, we're both huge 19th century Western history nerds. We literally plan trips, be like, all right, we're going to go to this battlefield, this Native American heritage site, petroglyphs, we just gorge on it. And standing in a location where, we've now had the experience of like stumbling upon sites that we don't even know, like aren't on the maps, of finding petroglyphs in the wild, finding, obsidian left behind on the ground from where someone would sit and just, make arrowheads. And then if they messed one up, they would just throw it on the ground. And then all of a sudden, 11,000 years later, I'm standing in the same spot. And you're like, oh my gosh, they sat here because there's a little mound here. And it just makes sense. Like, I would sit here. This makes sense.
Yeah.
And then you go, whoa, like they were just humans. They were just real people.
Yeah, and it's very transportive. Yeah. To be in those locations.
Yes. So that's my driving. If I had to sort of distill it down, like why I do what I do is to just salvage these lost narratives. Like I'm looking for the voices that are missing. I'm looking for whose point of view is not in the record. How do we deduce out of that? Like the Anne Bonny one, for example, there's only one text about Anne Bonny. There's court records of her, and she was, okay, it also gets crazy because there's another female pirate involved in this story whose name was Mary Read, who deserves her own play. And she successfully was in the British Navy for like 12 years disguised as a man.
Wow. 12 years.
12 years. Like,
I mean, that's the cognitive dissonance you have to have as a man in the Navy in that time period, to just completely overlook the fact that there's a woman, right? Like, it could happen, right? You just don't see it.
It did. It happened. And I'm like, that blows my mind. How was she so able to do that? Yeah, the cognitive dissonance.
I thought you were going to say P standing up.
How was she able to do that? That's her greatest accomplishment. No, it's just, so there's a whole thing there, but basically, so there's records of their sensationalized trial. But everything else that we have about them comes from a single book called A General History of the Pirates, who was written by somebody under an alias, Captain Charles Johnson, who's not a real person. And they believe that it was Daniel Defoe who wrote Robinson Crusoe. So the only historical evidence that we have is by a pirate fiction writer. But whoever wrote it is writing very much from a sort of first, it feels like they knew them. It feels like they were in that world. And so again, immediately completely suspicious historical document, trying to suss out these real people's story that we know they existed, but what really happened here is so much reading between the lines. Like a specific example would be, at some point, we know that Anne Bonny got pregnant, and then we know that they dropped her off in Cuba, where she was staying with a little sort of family that the captain who was her lover, who was basically just a house of whores. It was just a brothel. They just dropped her off in a brothel in Cuba and left. And then all the book says is like, and then after some time they came and picked her up. And there's no mention what happened to the baby. Like, did she abandon it? Did it pass away? And they never addressed this. We don't know historically. So I had to make choices about that in trying to tell this story, because it's a very different representation of this person's life.
Yeah.
I think it's so interesting that, and I mean, Hildegard was more of a saint, right? And she was more of a spiritual guide, and sacrificing her life, what's it called? A contemplative, right? Mm-hmm. For God. And you feel so connected to Hildegard, even though you can't know her, and you read her poetry, and you're very connected to her. And I think it's very interesting that you, Chandler, are putting yourself into this, because as a feminist, I guess, right? So your feminist bent is bolstered and boosted by Anne Bonny's life, and you trying to interact and imagine it and research it. And then, Crystal, your spiritual life is bolstered by, everyone has not a hero, but, obviously something drives you. I don't sit and read Hildegard's songs. I don't sing her songs. I don't do that. So I think that's that weird motivation that a person has. To me, it's kind of like a calling or a summons.
Sure.
And and I would love to know, I just want to keep talking to you forever. I just want to know more about your philosophy degree and your connection to Hildegard. But what I'm guessing is that there's just a personal feeling, like when you read those poems, it hits differently. Like there's just something, a deep, profound sort of soul recognition. And I don't know, I mean, again, there's so many different branches that we could go off into, and some of them are a little more like woo-woo than others, but
I think I sense where you're going, actually. I mean, just to answer your question, Rene, it's sort of like what we talked about with Allison a couple of weeks ago, it's really about courtship. It's about a courtship with this other life, this other being, that across history, across fiction and reality sometimes, that there's something to be gleaned from them. There's some kind of a soul connection, or like a, what do they call it? Like twin flame sort of a thing.
That's what my TV show's about.
Oh yeah.
Oh, we got so much to talk about.
Yes. And yeah, I mean, I don't know, it's inexplicable. And I think, I think it's like what I mentioned earlier is kind of communing with the basic humanity of another being who lived in a different time, sort of like Cloud Atlas, that movie. Cloud Atlas. Yes. The movie wasn't great, but the concepts were so good.
God,
And
it couldn't live up to what it tried to be.
Yeah,
yeah. Well, and I'm kind of getting into all that. My TV series is about past lives. And essentially it's just a big sneaky way for me to write like 22 period pieces that are disguised as a contemporary stoner comedy. But it's really just every period piece. But and like I would be curious. Okay, at the risk, I'll go out on a limb of sounding a little bit kooky here. I don't know what conclusions to draw from this. This is just something that if you've experienced anything like this, it's very surreal and very eerie, and it makes you feel connected to something that is hard to understand, which is that I've had the experience many times of thinking that I am writing something, creating something that is original, that I feel like I'm resting from myself. And then later confirming really eerie, specific details in a historical record that I wasn't aware of. Mm-hmm. Like, for example, I'm working on right now, Stephen and I are working on a musical about Dante Rossetti and Elizabeth Siddal, who were like pre-Raphaelite poets and painters. And that's a whole other thing too. There's just too much. But their studio, when I was visualizing these scenes, I thought I was being creative. I was like, ooh, what if for some reason in this set, there's like a wall of ivy like growing on the inside. And so I like described this ivy and I was like, that's good. That's going to look cool. And then deep in a historical record, the only firsthand account I could find, I found someone describing walking into their studio and it was like they had a wall of ivy growing on the inside. Yeah. And I'm like, what? Okay. And I don't want to I'm not just jumping to conclusions. Past life connection. It's this. I don't know what it means. But I do feel like I would be interested how you guys feel about like tapping into something, like somehow it feels like sometimes you feel it clashing and you feel it being pulled from you where you're like, I have to make this. I'm inventing this and I'm trying to force it out. And then sometimes there's just like a flow. Yeah. And sometimes you tap in, and I would be really curious what you guys think about just like, what are we like? Is it a collective unconscious kind of situation? Are we tapping into the world memory? Do places hold memory? Is it completely in my head? Am I making it up and it's pure coincidence? Maybe that would be hilarious. But also like, is there something deeper? Why are we called to certain subjects, people, art movements, things that just feel personal to us, and then others that we go, I don't care about that. Why? What is the answer to that?
Yeah. Okay. Well, I mean, as you're speaking, a lot of ideas were coming to me. I mean, fundamentally, how I look at it is there is no past and no future. And so all of the wisdom, the, information, let's say, of existence has already been quote unquote written, And so when we're doing any kind of art, whether it's writing, whether it's painting, whether it's, writing a play, whatever, we're channeling something and we're accessing something that is part of that, let's say, like collective, you could call it the collective unconscious. Some people call it like the Akashic records. Yeah. And I think it's all of those things and none of those things at the same time, because it's just it's too subtle really to describe, Yes. And there's even been studies, and we should pull this up, Rene, because we talk about this a lot, but there's been studies that show that like scientific discoveries happen at the same time in disparate places where there's no communication happening. It's really fascinating. It's just so clear that any energy responds to itself, And so what I think of when, I'm drawn to someone like Hildegard, it's just like, there's something about that energy that nourishes me, the way that the plant is drawn to the sunlight. There's something in my growth journey that I need to imbibe from that being. And the fact that they lived however many years ago it's not relevant to the fact that I need to imbibe of them, right? Like it transcends the time and space, especially when it's someone like Hildegard, whose works were so well preserved, kind of like in a it shouldn't have been, right? Like they should have been destroyed because they were attempted to be destroyed many times. And obviously that's true for many, many women with Hildegard. Like she has a really profound role for many women, whether they're, traditionally religious or not. She speaks to a lot of women, and probably more than women also. Just being one of the very few female doctors of the church, and one of the very few women in the 11th or 12th century that were actually preaching to the public. Like, these are really powerful things, and the fact that her work is preserved to me is an act of grace, however you want to define that, and so whenever we're channeling, and it, this is my perspective on it, we're channeling something, and that is grace. That's our experience of grace working through us.
I love that word channeling, and I love the collective unconscious, whatever the pool of truth. But like, I think it was Plato, you have to help me, Crystal, who said the forms, right?
Yep, that's Plato. Yeah.
And the word educare means to draw forth from within, and that we're just remembering. We are all one anyway. All matter is, according to quantum physics, all matter is entangled anyway. We are all one anyway. All of our new discoveries, as you said, it's just on this non-linear spiral of existence. And so creativity literally is this is creativity, connecting, and the unity that is ours to be had if we can focus just enough. I mean, just in this 45-minute conversation, the overlaps and the synchronicities, it happens everywhere all the time, but people don't pay attention to it. But our ability to unite with those in the past, and with each other, and with certain, as you said, like sunlight to what you need for your journey. But what we all need is to be tuned in and channel that force of creativity that is this. There's that isness of creativity that is available to everyone.
Yeah.
Even if you're not a dramaturg, no.
You're good. Not a dramaturg.
I love when you're just so expressive, Chandler, and you're just like such a mad scientist with your art. And I just love when you say sometimes it's this and sometimes it's that, and it's the same with meditation, right, Crystal? Sometimes you're really connected and inspired, and that channel is flowing, and sometimes it's blocked. So anyway, I was just trying to put a little cap on it, because I think we should do our meditation at some point.
Yeah. I love what you said, because it basically, in summary, creativity is transpersonal, right? It's not, we don't own it. It's not us. It's something that works through us. And so whether we're doing our art or we're sitting in meditation, our mind can be doing whatever, but the thing that's, the energy that's coursing through us is that thing, right? It is that access to that collective, whatever you want to call it, and it's not personal. We can't own it. We can't, possess it.
It's beautiful to think that while we are here now in the present, whatever that means, looking back to reach to these people, that they were also reaching forward from their time. And that, like, kind of what you're saying of, I mean, I'm just a huge Carl Sagan fan, big cosmos nerd. I love it. And this goes way beyond my pay grade. I'm not qualified to speak about anything to do with like astrophysics or anything like that. But I remember him kind of describing how there are places in the universe where time does not flow chronologically. It does not go A to B to C. Things can be happening simultaneously. It's sort of this multiverse that everyone's starting to kind of become aware of, this idea. And the idea that those things could be, that somehow they are happening at the same time, that we are connecting back to the past, they are connecting to the future, and that all of that is really happening in this schema that we don't really have the minds to understand. It's not linear, and that maybe that's all happening at once.
Absolutely. I mean, when you say the word schema, I think it's almost more reverse, in the sense that we have a schema an agreed upon perceptual schema that we're all experiencing
We can't.
reality in, but
Yeah.
but it's
all we got to
yeah,
try to
all we
make
got.
sense of
Yeah,
it.
exactly.
Yeah, I
Exactly.
gotta make this make sense.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally.
Okay, well, do something of that nature, Crystal. Good luck.
All right, let's see what happens. If you guys want to turn off your mics and your videos, you're welcome to do that. And I will pin myself.
Okay, thank you, thank you.
Yeah. All right. Let's go ahead and drop in to our bodies. Sitting with an upright spine if you can. Let all the ideas, all the concepts, and just melt away. And let your experience be of your body, of the physical reality of your body in this moment. Feeling the seat against the surface you're sitting on. Feeling the belly and the chest rise and fall with the inhalation and the exhalation. Bring yourself fully into this moment in time and space. This unique experience that is only happening now and will never happen again. And it has never happened before. Grounding yourself in the here and now through the physical body. And at the same time, connecting with the heart rather than the mind to all of the similar experiences, all these discrete, individual, unique experiences happening in time and space, both in this current time, in all times before and after. Connecting to the matrix of human experience. Throughout history, throughout the now, throughout the future. Billions and trillions, maybe countless pinpricks of consciousness. Coming to the surface to perceive life. Peeking out from behind the veil in all these different forms. Not only human forms, but any form, from an animal to a mineral. And while you feel yourself firmly grounded in your own unique expression at this moment, feel that heart connection to all those other expressions of consciousness, past, present, and future. Feeling the physical nature of the breath as it rises and falls. the pressure of the seat on the surface you're sitting on. Even the sensation of space surrounding the body, the sense of solidness of the body and the emptiness of the space. All the qualities that in normal circumstances make up a sense of me-ness or I-ness. And yet in this moment can be avenues to connect to all the other expressions of consciousness that arise and then dissipate. With the waves of time. The procession of generations. I'm feeling that sense of me-ness becoming a lot less relevant. Becoming a lot less pronounced. Noticing what that does to any sense of importance or urgency. Just inviting a sense of, oh yeah, it's not that big of a deal. That every moment we're experiencing is almost immediately becoming the past. Continuing to sense the body and its solidity. Its heaviness. And its dynamism and activity and aliveness. Coming into contact with that dynamism that's constantly available to us. And we simply tune in to what we feel, what our senses are coming up against. And start to become aware of yourself in the room that you're occupying. Becoming aware of the physical structure around you. The objects around you. The walls and the furniture around you. Externalizing the attention. And then as you're ready, you can gently open the eyes. Thank you both so much.
Crystal.
Wow, that was magical.
Chandler, thank you both so much.
I feel refreshed. That was so lovely.
I needed that this, when you said the I-ness and the me-ness, I was like, I was feeling that, like, and I felt more like connecting with, there's such a bigger world than what I have in my head all the time.
Yeah.
I think you're onto something.
It's our little prison, right?
Well, you guys can keep going. I have to teach a lesson.
I have to hop off too, but we should definitely do it again because we have a lot more to talk about.
Yes, there's more. There will be a part 2.
I feel like we always
so much simpatico.
That we always just scratch the surface.
Yeah, it's true. It's true.
Your typical podcast. Okay, now leave our guests with 3, whatever
takeaways, right?
Anyway,
yeah. I was like, I've never done a podcast, so I was like, what am I going to run out of like interesting things to talk about? No. It turns out not to compliment us, but I was interested in what you were saying. Like, I feel like there's so much more. There are so many branches.
There's a lot more.
We can go down.
Thank you, Chandler.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. It's so nice to meet you.
Take care.
Bye. Thank you.